How do you actually become the obvious choice? I want to break down a real life case study where my best friend came to me a few weeks ago and said that he had a new business venture that he was curious to take on, and it sounded like a great opportunity. And he asked me if I could help him with basically steps to tackling it. And at the end of it, I kind of took a step back and I was like, damn, that's really interesting. I've never actually gone through this process, start to finish, of like mapping back all of these steps. And I'm not going to pick out and say, like, this is from this chapter in the book, that's from that chapter in the book, this is this part of the theory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the entire story from his idea to the market research, the population, to how he's going to stand out, to exactly who he's going to reach out to, and how that could eventually expand, and what other income streams and things he could build into it. And what I think is particularly interesting about this is that it's an industry I've never spoken about before. So my friend is a construction scientist, and he's been working as a custom home builder. And he had this idea where he wants to build a consultancy service where he's providing custom reports for aging people to better prepare their home, to avoid things like falls or make it more accessible. This is something obviously I don't know much about, which is why, and probably something you don't know a lot about either, other than, obviously as you get older, you might need to equip your home to make sure that you don't slip and fall, or, I don't even know what he would do there, but he obviously does. And so he started with the market research, and this is what he brought to me and why he thinks that this is so interesting. He said, number one, the population is aging. Obviously, the baby boomers children, right, are getting much older, and the population's aging. At the same time, real estate prices are soaring. And the cost to move a house is really, really high. When I say that, a lot of people don't realize just how much it costs actually to move. So even if the new house that you're moving to is a cheaper house that you're moving from, you're still going to have to pay probably a few $100,000 in fees, from lawyers' fees to real estate percentages to land transfer taxes and accessing, other moving costs and things like that. So there's a big affordability aspect, and that's actually an important point that we'll get back to afterwards, that he incorporated one of his key insights there. And the space because the population's aging so much, space in, I don't know what you call them, old folks homes, what's the right technical name? Space in retirement homes is becoming very, very limited. So you put all of these things together, and it seems to follow that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be staying in the homes that they're in right now for much longer. And those homes are not equipped. They have stairs, they don't have ramps, they don't have any of the accessibility features, bars on the showers and stuff. And so one of his key insights that he had very, very early on in this. So what he did is he started looking for existing resources, right? Somebody else is like nothing, no idea that you have, nobody else has had this idea before. Like, first off, I always remember a story, Carolina, her name's Carolina Stolier, not the Carolina that we know. Carolina Stolier, I still remember I went to her very, very early on when I started the Personal Trainer Development Center, and I had an idea to build a business off of it. I don't even remember what the idea was, but I went to her for advice because she was somebody who was very, very smart in business. And I said, now, I'd love to tell you about this and get your advice, but only if you promise not to share it. Like, I don't want other people to go. And she goes, why? I was like, I just, I don't think anybody's doing this right now. And she just takes one look at me, and she's Argentinian. She goes, John, if nobody has done this before, or if nobody has tried this before, it is because it is a shit idea.
Oh my God.
It is the execution, not the idea, that matters. So we first look for existing resources, right? Who's talking about this? And one of the key insights that he realized very, very early on was that there was one major book, I can't remember the name, there was one major book that was written about this, and that there's a lot of blog posts and there's a lot of Reddit forums and stuff like that where people are talking about how to renovate their home as they age. But it's not the people who are aging, it's the children of the parents that are having these conversations in Reddit. And the book, the only major book that's been published on this, was actually written towards the children of the parents. And so I'm going to put a pin in this and come back, but this was a major insight that he had, that it's going to be the children largely that he's going to be speaking to of the parents and not the parents themselves. And I'll get back as to why that's a major insight in a little bit. Okay. So the first step that we had was to really start to think about this problem. And number one, if you work in fitness or health or anything, you will know, unfortunately, that prevention doesn't sell. You have to catch somebody at the point of their action or of their pain, and it has to be important enough for them to do something about right now. When he's trying, so the first thing that I said to him is, he can't sell this based off of the idea to somebody who is aging, but nothing has happened yet. Which is tricky, because he's doing this because he thinks it's a good business opportunity, but he's also doing this because he legitimately wants to prevent people from falling or getting injured. I mean, the stats are frightening. Once somebody falls and breaks their hips, if they're over the age of 70, there's something like an 80% death rate within the first 2 years after. I mean, it is so scary. And so if you really want to help people, you don't want to help people after they've fallen. You know what I'm saying? You want to avoid them falling. Unfortunately, what we know is that prevention doesn't sell. Okay, that's kind of tricky, isn't it? A fall is the most obvious pain point that you could get, where, somebody has a fall and you say, okay, this is the action point where you're going to somehow reach them. We'll get to how that's going to be done in a bit, where you're going to somehow reach them after they've fallen, and then they're going to pay you a bunch of money to consult with them to better equip their home and maybe, actually build it or install it for them. But like I said, they're already injured, and so you didn't avoid anything. You might avoid it from happening again. You might improve their quality of life, but you didn't avoid it happening. But the second thing to me, and where this really comes in with this obvious choice business philosophy, is that we don't know why they fell. They might have fallen for a lot of different reasons, which means it's going to be very, very difficult to track back and meet them at a point where they've actually fallen to build the resources or build the network. Really all that you can do is say, hey, if you've fallen, well, like, what doctors can we reach out to? What occupational therapists can we reach out to? It's like, I don't know whether you slipped on ice. I don't know whether you're just a drunkard and you just got drunk and fell. I don't know whether this is, an early sign of an undiagnosed, some sort of degenerative disease. I don't know I don't know the reason why you fell. So
Grandma Lush out there knocking back the whiskeys again. I'm sorry.
Hey, when you get to a certain age, you're allowed. I'm sorry. My grandma's 93. I think she should get drunk more often. I would fully approve. She lives alone. She's 93. I think
this is a quote card of the episode from Amber Reynolds. My grandma's 93. Yeah,
Amber's not wrong.
I think she should get drunk more often. Amber Reynolds.
If you're 93 years old, you should be going to strip clubs. You should be getting drunk.
Do all the drugs, do whatever. At that point, you've earned
drunk.
everything.
Amber's mama is just sitting at home doing shrooms, drinking whiskey.
Once you get to a certain age, I will fully support whatever.
Honey, I saw Elmo, and he was doing the best little dance on the wall.
I would so further that conversation. What kind of dance was it? Was it tango? Was it
Oh
cha?
my God.
What was it?
Valid point.
So we need, what I'm saying, you degenerates, is that what we need is a distinct moment that's specific. Right? If you're following, we need a distinct moment that's specific where we can impact to avoid a problem before it happens, but also is painful enough that they know that they need to take action and do something about right now? Okay, here's the answer. Immediately upon diagnosis of a degenerative disorder. So they haven't fallen yet. Nothing's necessarily happened. I'm sure that they probably have symptoms if they've been diagnosed. Okay, what's the degenerative disorder then? Well, we have a few to choose from, don't we? The most common is a cognitive disorder. It's just there's the most common in aging men and women, aging people. Sorry, maybe the man or woman doesn't identify as a man or woman. In aging people, which is great that, I feel like for a lot of their life, they probably couldn't truly be themselves. Mm-hmm. And now they're able to. But I digress. So cognitive is the most common. And, but the crossover to the solution is not, it's not inherently obvious, is it? Like, you have some sort of cognitive degenerative disease, like your Alzheimer's or something, and actually better building accessibility into your home is probably important, but you don't necessarily think about that. You think about it more with physical degenerative diseases. So on one hand, it's the most common, but I kind of threw it out for that reason, although it still might be worth investigating, worth talking to the doctor. So him and I brainstormed basically the major physical degenerative diseases and came down to a list of 3, which was MS, multiple sclerosis, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, and Parkinson's. So then I looked up the prevalences and just the major data points. Like, is this market big enough? Because it's very important that he starts very, very small, and you'll see this soon, and then can expand out if he wants to, but small in terms of like choose one disease to target in on, and also choose one very specific location. And so you need a big enough prevalence of a disease. Okay, so MS, multiple sclerosis, has 90,000 Canadians who are currently diagnosed with it that are living. And there's about 12 diagnosed a day. Likely, just knowing the demographics in Canada, that's going to be about 3 to 4 in Toronto that are, or surrounding areas, close enough, that are going to be fed by the same, call it 8 or 9 major hospitals. There's likely going to be 3 or 4 people diagnosed with MS every day. Okay, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, there's actually only 3,000 Canadians diagnosed with that, and there's about 1,000 people diagnosed a year with it. So less than 1 a day in Canada. Oh, sorry, less than 1 a day in Toronto, most likely. That's probably too small. Parkinson's, there's about 105,000 people diagnosed. So similar to MS, there's about 12 a day. Probably about 3 to 4 in Toronto. MS and Parkinson's. So I threw out ALS. So after we looked at those stats, I threw out ALS, right? Okay, so Parkinson's and MS. MS, multiple sclerosis diagnosis, are generally younger people who get diagnosed, where the average age of diagnosis is actually in the 40s. And Parkinson's, the average age is in the 60s. So pretty important distinction. MS is 75% women that get diagnosed. Parkinson's, on the other hand, affects twice as many men as it does women. I don't really know what this means, but those are pretty notable differences. Mm-hmm. And so I actually think that probably either would be a good market to start with. We chose, just him and I, to focus on MS, so multiple sclerosis. And but both are probably fine. The point is, though, you have to choose one, and you have to go as small as possible. And this is not saying you have to stay as small as possible. In fact, one of the most interesting things that I've realized as I've been writing this book and just really investigating this philosophy of obvious choice business is that it forms the framework of pretty much every major company that exists. We think of these companies as they are today, and we compare ourselves and learn what they do based off of how big they are today, not realizing that when they started, they were very different from how they are today, and were probably much more similar to where they were very early on than they are today. Peter Thiel, who was co-founder of PayPal, early investor of Facebook, now Meta, actually makes a very strong argument. So this guy is one of the biggest Silicon Valley investors, right, of the biggest companies in the world. And he makes an exceptionally strong argument towards going tiny, minuscule small when you start. He says, the first very counterintuitive idea is to go after small markets. Markets that are so small, people often don't even think that they make sense. He then added, that's where you get a foothold, and then if those markets are able to expand, you scale into a big monopoly business. The monopoly idea is you should get to a large market share. You have a monopoly if you have a large share of the market. When you're starting a company, you're starting small. So you want to get to a large share of your market quickly. Therefore, you want to start with very small markets. You take over a very small market, and then you expand over time. PayPal started with 30,000 power sellers on eBay. It was an idiosyncratic subset of the online payments context, but they had some very unique problems. It was possible to come up with a vastly superior solution to quickly gain mind share and gain market share, and we got to about 30 to 35% of market share in 3 months. Facebook started with 10,000 students at Harvard. It went from 0 to 60% market share in 10 days. That was an auspicious start, even though it was a market so small that you could not have gotten a venture capitalist to finance it with a business plan. The point is that dominating small markets can lead to larger triumphs. And the best way to execute on an idea that's so big that it could one day change the world is to become the obvious choice to a small group of people. It's to fix what's inside of your fence first, to become famous to that family first. I told my buddy to brand himself as the multiple sclerosis, as the MS home renovation guy in Toronto. This is your branding. You are the MS home renovation guy in Toronto. That's your brand. That's your website. You're going to work backwards from that. Because when you work backwards from that tiny, right, very distinct, encapsulated idea, it's actually very obvious how to execute forwards. Where do you network? Well, what are the doctors and occupational therapists in Toronto that specialize with MS? There's not that many of them. It's not that hard to find them. And they are the people who are going to be diagnosing and working with your target audience at the exact point when they get diagnosed. What content are you going to produce? You're going to create exceptionally long tail keyword articles. How to renovate my home once I get diagnosed with MS. What do I need in my house to live better with MS? Help. My dad just got diagnosed. Help. My mom just got diagnosed with MS. How can I make their home safer? There's not going to be that many, but there's going to be enough. And the specificity of how you're going to tackle these things, you could take those exact same articles and you can brand it to the doctors, you can brand it to the occupational therapists with your name at the bottom. And you can give it to them as a handout when people get diagnosed. It's the same work or less work than creating a post on Instagram. The difference is how specific you are and how strategic you are up front in where that work's going to go. Medical events that you can speak at. There are lots of events of doctors. You can pitch the events to speak at them and give a talk at the medical event for the doctors of how they can better help educate their patients on how they can outfit their home. You'll donate and participate with the MS Society of Toronto. You'll make donations on their walks. You'll be a sponsor. That'll be your advertising spend. You'll set up a booth. You'll give presentations at their events. You will offer yourself. So you see how clear this is. Rory Sutherland, the advertising exec, once said that the more exclusionary we are, the more inclusionary we become. He said, people believe something that only does one thing is better at that thing than something that does that thing and something else. I love that. People believe something that only does one thing is better at that thing than something that does that thing and something else. Take a second to think about the power in that statement. If I were to say to you, I'm a home renovation specialist, you would think, cool. You're probably decent at what you do, whatever. If I were to say to you, I'm a home renovation specialist helping aging adults outfit their homes. Okay. If I were to say to you, I am a home renovation specialist in Toronto specializing in people who have just been diagnosed with MS. I help people renovate their homes to live better with MS in the city of Toronto. You're like, yo, you are probably pretty fucking awesome at that. Now, that does not mean that I can't help people also renovate their homes to deal with Parkinson's or just better equip their homes to avoid falls, does it? But if I say that I do all those things, you lose faith at how good I am at one of those things. This is the bed of nails paradox. The bed of nails, of course, is a famous parlor trick where you lie down on a full bed of nails and everybody in the audience gasps and goes, ooh, but really what you're doing is just demonstrating the principles of pressure. When you lie down on a full bed of nails, your entire weight is distributed over a large surface area. Now, if you were to just step on one nail, all of the pressure is now concentrated on that one. It goes straight through your foot. Well, a lot of communication, a lot of branding failures fall prey to the bed of nails paradox. They think that by doing more things or saying that they do more things, they're adding more value. Even if you can do more things, people consider you to be much more skilled the fewer things you say that you do. Now, over time, of course you can expand out to other cities or other diseases. But you're going to need to do it systematically. And you're going to need to do it in a way that you actually build a unique brand and follow the same steps for each one. In the Obvious Choice book, I give the example of Love Your Center. They exist in Toronto. And Love Your Center is the parent company, and they own 12 brands. They're an industrial cleaning company. And they own 12 brands. And the brands are Love Your Rug, Love Your Dress, Love Your Gear, Love Your Tailor, Love Your Purse, Love Your Drapes. There's 12 of them. And what they know is that they're an industrial cleaning company that can industrial clean just about everything. But if you have hockey gear, or if you have a carpet, or you have a rug, or you have a dress, you could think, I'm going to go to an industrial cleaner, and they probably do a pretty good job, but maybe they don't quite know how to do wedding dresses. Or you could find Love Your Dress, who specializes in cleaning dresses, and say, I know that they're going to be great at this. And so what this company did is they built individual websites, and you can look at this: loveyourdress.ca, loveyourrug.ca, loveyourtailor.ca. Look up these things. It's the same website, unique domains, and each website has a different phone number, has a different email, has a different SEO strategy, where they have their own blog where they're hitting different keywords specific to that one thing. It's the same truck that picks up the gear. The same van is going to go and pick up a rug from one person, hockey gear from another, a post from another, and they're going to bring it back to the same industrial cleaning center, who, of course, has built different processes for cleaning these different things. But when you call in, my guess is that you call in to the same person at the desk, and if they see a number on their switchboard come in from number 8, they know to answer the phone. Hello, love your dress. And if they see it come in from number 4, they know to answer it. Hello, love your tailor. If my friend wanted to expand into other degenerative diseases, he would do the same thing. If he wanted to expand into different cities, he would do the same thing. He would just pick up and replicate exactly what he's done with MS in Toronto and done it with Parkinson's. Now, he'd have advantages because he'd have doctors and occupational therapists that probably diagnose people and work with people with both, but he would build an individual brand. Or what he could do is, of course, sell licenses, which we'll get to in a bit. Back to one of the key insights, which is that the customer is the child, often, of the parent. It's not going to be every time, but the parent might be resistant to a service like this. Our parents largely, I don't know, when, Amber, you guys tell me if you're different. My parents and parents of good friends of mine that I've gotten to know well, they just grew up in a very different time than we did, where they were sons and daughters of people who came out of the war. Their parents went through rations. Their parents, especially in my family, Ashkenazi Jewish parents, a lot of them were forced out of their homes and immigrated to new places and got started as new immigrants. And my parents were the sons and daughters of immigrants. And so there was that pinch, there was that squeeze. All that I'm saying is that I have found that my parents' generation has a serious reluctance to spend any money on anything that they deem to be completely not necessary. To the point where, you have serious issues now. Like, I've got friends with this. Their parents are, especially in the United States. In Canada, we don't have the same kind of inheritance tax. But the United States, I've got friends whose parents have passed away, and they're having to sell off tons of those parents' assets because the tax bill is just so high on the inheritance. It's actually a big problem. And so if we know that their customer is going to be largely the children of the parents, but we also know that the children are going to have to get their parents' permission. So this is what my friend and I discussed, is adding into the report is not just what we're going to install into your home or what you think that should be in your home, but actually is going to be a cost analysis comparing how much money it's going to cost for you to renovate your home versus move. And this is going to be part of the deal that's pitched to them with the report, is that actually this report is going to save you a lot of money. And we're going to provide you a full cost analysis that includes moving costs, land transfer costs, lawyers' fees, home care costs, ongoing. If you're going to need any additional extended health care that's going to come to your home that you would not need, or you would not need as much if you build some of these accessibility features, the difference between going to a home last minute if something happens versus doing this in advance. And so what the children of the parents are going to be able to do when they say to their parents, hey, we want you to do this consultancy, this assessment, well, they're going to be able to go to their parents and they're going to be able to say, but they're going to give you a cost analysis. This is how you're going to financially justify this to yourself. And so that's where some of these little insights are going to really, really come in handy. So the final bit is, how much money could you make with this? Right? Like, how big is this? I mean, a detailed report, like he threw some numbers at me. I think completely reasonably, and this was on the lower end of what he was thinking. A detailed report you could easily charge about $5,000 for, and this is not building anything, right? This is just a detailed report of an expert going into your home and providing this. And so you only need 20 customers a year to make $100,000. And it's highly profitable. Your expenses are your time, gas, maybe there's some advertising, marketing expenses, but there's no equipment, there's no inventory, there's no nothing. So it's actually a wonderfully simple, wonderfully profitable business. 20 customers at $100,000 a year. So considering that there's 90,000 people who already live in Canada with MS, based off of the demographics of Canada, that's probably going to be 20 to 30,000 in Toronto or Toronto and surrounding areas. And there's going to be 3 or 4 new people a day. That's a more than big enough market for 50, 100 a year, right? To make a few $100,000 a year, just as yourself. Now, this is just me playing around because I like doing this stuff. What are some additional potential revenue streams once you become the obvious choice for this? Once you have all of the major doctors and occupational therapists in the biggest city in Canada recommending you as the obvious choice to renovate the home of anybody who gets diagnosed with MS, what are ways that you could make additional money from this? Well, the most obvious is that you could refer the work out to contractors to actually do the installation work and take a piece of that. Or you could be the contractor, which is something that he just doesn't want to do right now because he's been doing that for the last 15, 20 years and wants a break. But he could easily be the contractor. I mean, his entire experience is general contractor work. And so that would be, I mean, the most obvious and most profitable. He could do something as simple as affiliate and take a referral fee for the medical equipment that gets installed. So he doesn't even need to be responsible for the installation in any way, not even as a referral. But if somebody buys the medical equipment or whatever through him that they install, he takes a cut off of it. He could create a certification. He could create education around this for people who want to do it in other cities. You think about how big this market is going to become with aging adults that are going to be staying in their home, that are going to be having these diseases. Well, he could create a certification for other contractors to become experts in home renovations for MS, right? And then, of course, he could expand out, like we spoke about, to other towns. He could expand out to potentially other diseases. So I wanted to share that all with you because, we've never actually broken down kind of the whole thing and the thought process from like, here's an idea, here's assumptions that I'm basing this idea off of, here's the research and a few insights. Okay, how do we tackle this, make it manageable, not bite off more that we can chew, keep it super profitable, and know precisely how we're going to execute on this forward in small little bits systematically in a way that maintains the simplicity and the profitability of this type of business. So I thought that was fun.
My favorite part of that is the fact that the niche still matters. And I love the insight of being more concerned with the percentage of the market share than the size of the specific market. If it's 10,000 people tops, but you get 6,000 of those 10,000 people,
Yeah, right.
you know what I mean?
At
It's so much more.
$5,000 each.
It's so much more important than having 200,000 general people that you're probably never going to attain anyway. It's just you can't get that many random people's attention. right?
Right.
It's just not, at least not that way. But if
Well,
you
and
get
where do
six
you
of the
even start?
10,
Where do
right?
you even
Where
start?
would you start with just generalizing something like that? And that's near and dear to my heart because that's where I see so many of our students who are new to starting businesses find their first point of collapse. We get them, and if they're going to use social media, they try to take over all of social media. Uh, I saw a guy talking about squats, so I'm going to talk about squats. And I saw another lady who was talking about menopause, so I'm going to talk about that. I saw another guy talk about sports performance, so I'm going to do a little of that on Thursday. Like, bro,
What?
this is not going to help you. If you found left-footed penalty kickers who fail on penalty kicks 20% of the time in worldwide football,
Yeah.
work with them.
Well, I think the point is there's obviously a lot of opportunities. You need some reasoning to choose and to direct your efforts. And I think that the reasons that you choose for whatever you choose are probably less important. Like the quality of the reasons that you choose are probably less important than that you actually choose and be happy with it. This is top of mind for me. I actually just got off the phone with Jennifer and we built our outreach plan for the book promotion. And I mean, we're more than a year away, but for the next year, my marketing plan, our mantra is catch people in the act of doing something good and become their biggest fan. And okay, that's cool. Well, who do you catch? How do you catch them? What do you do and how do you keep focused? And so I had to think, so the way that I envisioned it in my mind is it's kind of a Venn diagram, which is okay, if we're looking at this from markets, what market I need, number one is markets that are really going to benefit from this book, which there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. We just figured out that construction scientists will benefit from this book, right? Like there's a lot. Okay, so that's fine. So I'm probably not going to start there. So then I thought about, well, what really is true to me? I think a great book, I think what you can really feel about a book is when the author embodies the book. A lot of really bad nonfiction books, you kind of feel like the author is writing this as almost this aspirational tome where they're writing about things that they think that they should be doing, and then they're almost preaching to you that you should be doing those things. Whereas a great book is you're going on a journey with the author, and the author is sharing his or her process, their process, of going on that journey with you. And they're embodying it, and they're figuring stuff along the way, and they're describing to you and making it matter for you in a way that you can apply it, but they're embodying it. So I thought, okay, well, that's cool. So what is it with me that I really embody? And there were much fewer. And then I thought, as the third part of this Venn diagram is, well, if my goal is to get word of mouth, like my goal in this book is to get word of mouth, I understand that by and large, people don't change. There's a line that I write in this book that's actually the entire chapter is about this concept, which is people who buy lots, people who don't. People who hire coaches hire a lot of coaches. People who don't hire coaches don't. It is way harder to try to convince somebody who has never hired a coach to hire you as a coach than it is to find somebody who's already hiring coaches all over the place to hire one more coach. So if my goal then is to generate word of mouth from the book, it follows that I want to find people who already don't shut up about stuff that they do. So I want markets that are already very loud and very outspoken about what they do. I don't think construction scientists are very loud and outspoken. They're probably not a great market for marketing the book, for word of mouth. So what I identified then, if you put those three together and you find the middle of that Venn diagram, the four markets that I'm targeting with the book are, I call it indie author slash self-publishing. Number one, personal training, pretty obvious. CrossFit,
Mm.
and then digital nomad slash minimalism. So basically, like minimalist digital nomads. There's a lot more people that will benefit from this book, but I had to choose. And so now with those four markets, what we're doing is we're systematically finding the behind the scenes folks who are influential in those markets. And over the course of the next year, I'm going to be sent every single day 10 to 15 people basically to like interact and engage with. And that means read their newsletters, go on their social media, share their work. If they're coming out with something like a book or whatever, buy their book, support it, share it. Call them up once I get to know them a little bit and be like, hey, let me tell you what's working for us. You have to choose something at one point that's going to give you a game plan to execute on, I guess is what I'm saying. And it might not be the best opportunity generally, I guess, but it should be an opportunity that you feel is true to you, and it should be a good enough opportunity. And I think there's a lot of good enough opportunities.
That makes sense. I think that because most of, and I'm speaking about our students in the online trainer academy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because so many of us go enter into business sometimes from a place of desperation, we aren't able to identify
Right.
or choose to be as deliberate
Yeah.
as we ramp up to the business. And if there's anything in particular that I see sort of creates an overhead of difficulty for the students that I'm able to interact with, it's the fact that they don't really have the time to do it, for lack of a better term, properly.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a place where we sort of have to manufacture engagement. And early on, what that looks like is talking to five people a day that you may not know. Um, Early on, what that looks like is something like a founding client challenge where you have
Right.
to announce to people that you already know that may not be specifically in that Venn diagram that you're talking about. Some people are going to be outside of it. Some people aren't going to be the type of people who have several coaches yet, but you end up applying strategy. And what I love about what you just talked about, and the fact that this is a part of the book, is that I think it's going to give some of those sort of indie writers and authors, definitely personal trainers, or generally people starting a business, it's going to give them an upfront sort of yellow brick road to follow to get to Oz. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So that they don't find themselves suddenly in front of the great and powerful Oz trying to figure out what they're going to do. They'll be able to engage in things in a way up front that feel a little bit more organic and naturally grown. Um, because, in the industry and just being associated with coaching, what we see often in our own inboxes are people that are trying to force an organic relationship.
Right.
I'm going to like 6 of your posts in a row and then go immediately to your inbox. It's not really a great strategy.
And why are you liking my posts? You know what I'm saying? Like why
Absolutely.
did you choose me? It's just a scatter shot. I want to circle back to what you said about acting out of desperation. I think that that's such a key point. It's so important to um, begin this process in more of a power position where you can be more patient. I mean, my spirit animal is a turtle, like it's always been. And you can see like the mug that I'm drinking from, like it's a turtle, tortuga. Always. I have, if you, I mean, I don't, every time that I take pictures, I'm not obviously in my home right now. I'm in Nicaragua for some reason that I don't quite understand. But it's a very interesting place. I'm enjoying it here, but very rough around the edges, much more than I anticipated. Not in a bad way, but it's, if you look around my house, I've got turtles everywhere, and they're reminders to me to go slow. But you have to earn the ability to do that. And I'm actually a big proponent of not jumping all in, of not burning the boats. I think that that makes very good motivational fodder. I think that for a lot of people, that's really shit advice,
Yes.
because when you do that, you're forced into desperate type activities to make ends meet. Whereby if you drive Uber on the side to meet your bare necessities, or you've got a gig where you bartend, or whatever you're doing on the side to make a bit of money, yeah, I get it. Things might happen a little bit slower. You're not burning the boats. You're never going to stand on stage and say, I risked it all. I was down to my last penny, sleeping on the floor outside, couldn't even afford my rent, and then I made it happen. And this is how you do it. You got to give yourself no option to get out. Now, I kind of think that that's bullshit. I kind of think that actually the much better way is to open up space for yourself to think through this problem much more strategically and not act out of desperation. And I love that things like Uber exist, because you can still choose your own hours. You can still turn it on and off. If you're really working on something and it's going well, you don't have to stop because you've got to clock in at 9 and clock out at 4. You
Right.
can just not drive that day. And if you're really not feeling it that day and you need a mental break, you just drive the whole day and get energized by conversations you have.
Right.
I think that that's wonderful. I really do. And so I wanted to just circle back to that, I guess, Ren, because I think that there's a lot of advice that we see in a very quick hit, short term, dopamine induced social media world that we live in that really turns people a lot the wrong way. I mean, you're having these conversations with our students that really should not be in that position.
Right.
They should not be. And yeah, I mean, I've designed some strategies to help you get out of it as quick as possible, and they work as well as they could possibly work, but they don't always work because nothing always works when you're desperate. Reliably, I know that we can help you over time in the Online Trainer Academy if you're already got doing 1,000 a month in the Online Trainer Mentorship, but like this week,
Right.
this month, maybe not. I mean,
Right. Right.
maybe not.
It's the easiest well to fall into and get trapped. So the
Mhm.
workers have to come get you out. Uh,
Yeah,
it's the I need it yesterday well.
the I need it yesterday well. Little
'Cause it,
Timmy fell in the I need it
right,
yesterday well.
right.
No, no, Mama, you're just taking shrooms again. There's no
Yeah.
well.
Grandma, you're back on the Hennessy and rum and Coke. Um, is Hennessy a black alcohol?
Why is little Timmy wearing an Elmo costume down in that well, dancing to Michael Jackson's Thriller? Oh, Grandma. Okay. Well, I'm gonna recommend another episode, and then we'll get out of here. I think that's the pod. That was fun for me. I mean, I'm interested to see what the feedback is going to be on this episode. It was different, but these kinds of case studies that are like completely unrelated. Like, I don't think there's a
Oh,
single construction scientist that listens to this episode. So to have something that is completely unrelated allows some sort of separation, I feel like, from our world sometimes, and allows us to see the problem in a different light. I've spoken to my literary agent a fair bit about this, about like, this existential thought of, oh, my ideas aren't new, because I know that my ideas aren't new. She says, yeah, but they're going to be new the way that you're talking about them. And for a lot of people, because of the way that you're able to tell stories and communicate and simplify these complex topics, a lot of people are going to be able to finally make something out of these ideas that they might have heard before. And there's a lot of power in that. And so I'm interested to see what people think of this. Anyway, if you are looking for another episode to listen to, I'm going to recommend you check out episode 147. This is an episode called Good Information, Bad Advice. And I wanted to record that one because I think that the information economy that we live in is wonderful, but I also think that it's addictive, where we can learn everything with a device in our pockets, where anybody can teach anything with a device in their pockets. We have more information than we've ever had, and a lot of it is objectively very good information that's bad advice for you. And in this episode, episode 147, we really help you figure out how to delineate information from advice to be able to focus in on, I guess, what matters, what you can make use of, and look at the other stuff and just ignore it and not say that it's bad or not talk shit about that person, but just say, yo, that's not for me at this time, and confidently ignore it. So that's episode 147, Good Information, Bad Advice. Hope that you enjoy that. And thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this.